In today's video, we're going to be discussing a huge blockbuster NHL trade that almost happened but did not. Both of these players ended up being traded, but in separate deals. It could have drastically changed the entire NHL landscape as we know it today. We'll discuss what almost happened coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have some new information I want to talk about here today on a scenario that almost really transformed the entire NHL and would have teams looking very differently today had this happened. Of course, this was not all that long ago. We're talking about the Jack Eichel trade that sent him from the Buffalo Sabres to the Vegas Golden Knights just a couple of years back. There were certainly lots of other rumored and interested teams in the mix, and he recently conducted an interview on a hockey-based podcast where he talked pretty openly about some of the other teams that were in the mix and what he had heard, what he knew leading up to the deal actually being finalized, eventually sending him to Vegas. Now, in case you weren't aware or can't remember all the details, the exact trade that actually did happen sent Jack Eichel from the Buffalo Sabres to the Vegas Golden Knights, and the return was Alex Tuch, Peyton Krebs, who was still considered a prospect at that point. Tuch was a pretty established NHLer. Of course, didn't really play a lot. Was originally in Minnesota. Went to Vegas in the expansion draft where he really established himself for sure. They got a 2022 first-round pick and a 2023 second-round pick. But that first-round pick in 2022, they drafted Swedish player Noah Östlund, who looks like a pretty promising prospect. And the 2023 second-round pick ended up being traded to the Minnesota Wild, and they picked up Jordan Greenway. So ultimately, for Eichel, they got, at the time, I guess you could say, three players that are currently on their roster and a pretty promising first-round prospect in Noah Östlund. So all in all, I think the Buffalo Sabres made out pretty well. I know Peyton Krebs hasn't quite been the offensive player that he was drafted to be. He was a pretty high first-round pick. He's been, he certainly looks like he can be an NHL player, but not to the level that I think a lot of us thought he would be, at least not yet. But he's still quite young, still finding his way, and the Sabres do have a lot of young players playing around him that he doesn't always get to play super high in the lineup. So we'll see how things develop for him. But of course, as we know, another high-profile player and another big blockbuster trade that did happen was the Matthew Tkachuk trade between the Calgary Flames and the Florida Panthers. Now, if this other deal for Eichel had have taken place, we wouldn't have seen that Matthew Tkachuk blockbuster deal. That Tkachuk Florida trade with sending Huberdeau and Uyghur back to the Flames, arguably the biggest trade we've seen in the past decade. There's a lot of star power in that deal, a lot of big contracts, a lot of point production, just a lot of superstar talent. Overall, arguably the biggest trade in a long, long time. Now, as Jack Eichel talked about on that podcast, there was lots of teams in and out. Now, of course, I don't remember at the time. Of course, it was a hot topic. We talked about it a lot on the channel. And whenever you get players like that, especially higher profile guys that are rumored to be on the move, and it's a hot topic. We talk about it a lot. There's new information emerging all the time. There's tons of teams that are interested. So there tends to always be a lot of trolls and critics on the comment section saying, oh yeah, you got to trade it everywhere. This isn't going to happen. Basically say that I'm just making things up when it's not the case. You got to understand when a high profile player is available, many teams are interested, and information continuously gets leaked out about who's having conversations and who's serious, who isn't, and the data changes all the time. He confirmed that there were times when it looked like it could be Minnesota. There was times when Carolina was heavily in the mix. Obviously, Vegas, came out near the end and got the deal done. But the Calgary Flames was the other team that was right down to the wire. And originally he said there were some teams in the East. He didn't really specify. There was some rumors about the Bruins, Rangers, etc. But they were out on the sweepstakes pretty early based on what he had to say. And then it came down to Calgary being the runner-up to Vegas. Now, like I said, we know the actual trade that happened, but the belief was, at the time, the rumor mill was suggesting that the Sabres and Flames were indeed having conversations. We talked about this on the channel. We talked about the rumors about Jack Eichel for Matthew Tkachuk. There was speculation and concern even at least a year ahead in Calgary that Matthew Tkachuk might not want to stay long term. As we know, he did not, and he ended up getting dealt, forcing his way to Florida, signing a long-term contract. Now, ultimately, I don't think that Matthew Tkachuk leaving the Flames had anything to do with the roster construction, his thoughts on the team's ability to win, or any of that stuff. I honestly think he's made enough comments about what he likes about Florida. I just honestly think he wanted to get out of that market. I don't think he had interest in playing in Canada. He wanted to play in a place where he would kind of, be a little quieter media-wise, fly under the radar a little bit. He certainly seems to really love the weather and the beaches and everything comes with being a resident of Florida. And I really think that's what he wanted. And I think he's wanted that for some time. So whether or not Jack Eichel came to Calgary and he stayed, or, any other big names came to Calgary, I don't know that it really was going to change his mind. Some people thought when Johnny Gaudreau left, that sealed his fate. I don't think that's the case. I honestly think I've heard enough from Matthew Tkachuk to think that what he did was strictly his own opinion. Now, would he have signed in Buffalo? I don't know, right? That's the big question. At the time, though, he had a little bit of term on his contract. They could have had him for a couple of years. They could have taken the chance. We've seen it happen. Teams try this. It doesn't always work out. Ultimately, if Buffalo had made this trade, if Calgary would have agreed to it, they might be looking at this now going, whoa, like this didn't work out. But if they had Tkachuk's rights, maybe the Sabres were the ones making the blockbuster trade after his contract expired, not Calgary. So maybe Buffalo is a team that ended up, maybe trading to Florida and, getting in Jonathan Huberdeau or something like to that effect, right? Obviously, these two guys could have been traded for each other. Like the Flames did not want to trade Tkachuk. They wanted him to stay. And they were doing everything they could to make that happen. So even as much as they liked Eichel and they wanted to be involved in the mix, they were offering different packages that did not include Matthew Tkachuk. The Sabres were insistent, if you want Eichel, Tkachuk's got to be included, and they wouldn't do it, so therefore this deal didn't happen. But there was lots of conversations, and clearly the Flames must have at least considered it, because they were involved with the negotiations right down to the wire. Jack Eichel to Calgary obviously would not, like I said, they would have traded Tkachuk for him. So you would not have Huberdeau and Uyghur there today. You would not have that atrocious Huberdeau contract. I mean, obviously, when the Flames picked him up and he was a pending UFA and they signed him, he'd come off a 100-point season. It didn't seem like an atrocious, ridiculous, irresponsible deal to do. You also didn't think the GM would be leaving within the same year, right? That didn't make things any better either. But at the same time, the Flames would look a lot different here today. So Huberdeau and Uyghur wouldn't be there. Would they have signed Condrey still? That's a possibility. I could see that maybe still being something that happened. Obviously, I still think Gaudreau leaves, but maybe he stays. But I think, again, he was leaving more for family reasons. Tkachuk left more for personal reasons. I don't know that those guys stay in Calgary because of an Eichel trade. It's really, I don't know that we can say that with any certainty. So maybe at this point, their top two centers are Eichel and Condrey. It's hard to say, right? Obviously, it would be very different now. Like with Tkachuk, if you look at this things, like how things could have worked out, he goes to Buffalo, plays a couple of years, and if he's not happy there, maybe they make that trade. Maybe Huberdeau ends up in Buffalo instead. Would he have signed a long-term deal? There's just so many question marks that comes with revisionist history here that, you can't really say what the NHL landscape would look like. Would Vegas have won the Stanley Cup if they were not the ones successful in landing Eichel? I mean, he was a huge part of their win. I mean, yes, they had lots of other key components that allowed them to be successful and get the job done, but he was a huge part of it. I mean, he didn't win the Conn Smythe, but he was right there. He was pretty much a runner-up behind Marchessault. You could have given it to 2 or 3 players there. So, history could be very different here today. It'd be kind of weird to be seeing Eichel in a Calgary Flames uniform, But they were one of the big factors was the fact that the Flames were one of the teams that were willing to let him have at the time at least, it was considered a controversial, surgery with no history with NHL players. Well, now it does have history, and teams certainly seem to be a lot more open. And in that sense, he was a bit of a trailblazer in helping move things along medically for other players to have that type of surgery if they have the same type of injury in the future. So we've already seen other players have it done and be successful in return. So at the end of the day, things worked out. The Sabres get themselves a good return. Eichel's in Vegas. He's happy. He's got a Stanley Cup. But the Calgary Flames are not happy. They lost Tkachuk anyway. The trade has not worked out well for Calgary with the Huberdeau-Weegar return, especially on the Huberdeau side of things. Weegar's not doing too bad. I think they like having him there. But overall, if the Flames had a do-over and they could have either kept Tkachuk or traded for Eichel, I think they'd take Eichel in a heartbeat over what they have there now. So, I'm sure that things would look a lot different here today. And it just would be really, really, it'd be weird because, like I said, does Vegas win the Stanley Cup? Is Tkachuk still make his way to Florida through a different path? Lots of questions. We don't know the answers, but it's sometimes nice to look back at what almost happened and how the NHL could look a lot different today. Let me know your thoughts on this huge blockbuster trade that came close to happening, but not quite, obviously. And let me know what you think in the comments. We'll talk about it further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe, stick around. Make sure you stick around for all the NHL news. We'll be back here in the next few days starting to cover the World Juniors. Of course, the NHL is on a break. Right now, I'm recording this video on Christmas Eve, December 24th, 2023. If you celebrate Christmas, I hope you have a great holiday. Merry Christmas to everybody watching. Thank you for your support all season long, all year long. Certainly look forward to continuing the NHL coverage when we get back to NHL hockey here in a few days. We'll mix in the World Junior coverage as well. So look forward to continuous content on the channel. I'm going to be recording some other content today to go on the channel for tomorrow. So there will be content on Christmas Day, Boxing Day, but the Christmas Day content will be recorded ahead of time. I am going to take the day off to spend with family. So that will be a pre-recorded video going up to talk about the World Juniors to get everybody ready for one of the funnest tournaments of the year. So let me know your thoughts on that. Look forward to more content. Again, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, whatever you celebrate. I hope you're having a great time enjoying friends and family. Enjoy the break, and we'll catch you real soon here on the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.